What's happening, folks? Back with another reaction, back with some more of The and their 1983 album Soul Mining. As always, major thank you to Kim. And the next track is The Twilight Hour, which certainly gives you a visual sense, twilight being when day turns to night, and so they're, number one, if you have a good sense of photography, you can take some pretty amazing pictures during golden hour, the twilight hour. But of course also there are conceptual meanings transitioning from night to day, from light to dark, and the moods, feelings, or atmospheres that are associated with both sides of that and the transition itself. I would not be surprised if this is both a metaphor and a backdrop for some visual or narrative story. And in that regard, I know that Matt Johnson's songwriting is widely hailed as being not only creative, but clever and layered. So in that regard, I feel like that is a likely bet, though of course it might have nothing to do with anything I've just said. Let's give it a listen. This is The track is The Twilight Hour, and it's from their 1983 album Soul Mining.
You're lying on your bed and making shadows on the wall. It's almost too hot to move outside your window. People are driving home from work for the weekend, but you're waiting for the phone to ring. You're gonna tell her exactly what you think. You practice getting your mouth around the words that explain the way you feel. You've been scared to show your real self in case she doesn't like what she sees. You've been a prostitute to humility. She's invaded your life, and you've got to live a power in order to survive. You were emotionally independent, but starved of affection. But now you've been trapped by tenderness and been beaten into submission. It's now way past the hour she usually phones. Decided not to tell her you're a joke. from your heart and rubbing the meat into your giving up all your friends. You're relying on her for your independence. She can't leave you alone and defenseless. You're relying on her for your independence.
What a brilliant song. And I have so much to say, I'm probably going to forget some of it, so let me jump straight into the lyrics. It's so cleverly and yet brutally emotionally written. And in fact, I think there might be two sides to this. One, I feel like it might be a relationship which is asymmetrical, if not maybe a bit emotionally abusive. But secondarily, I feel like we might be in the mind of the neurotic narrator, and maybe this woman not calling him for the 10 or 15 minutes that he thinks she should have already called or would normally already have called is making him run through extreme scenarios and to overinterpret what could just be, an unusual circumstance, or her just happening not to call him at the time that he was supposing or expecting or hoping. So maybe there's a bit of both of that, but he seems to be saying and in fact it's sort of like said in the third person, but the theatrical vocal delivery, which, has some anxiety in it and, feels like some words are like bending to the feeling of the sentiments in the line. It feels like the narrator's almost like looking outside himself. He's like projecting this onto a hypothetical third person, even though it's really about him. But yeah, saying that like this guy is scared of not being fully accepted, so he kind of keeps some of himself hidden, and maybe even like chooses not to live together because like that might lead to his true self being exposed and being rejected. But then he's saying that when she's not calling him when he expects, when the twilight hour comes, he's like being tortured. Like, why are you torturing me this way? And saying, you can't leave now. Like, I gave up all my friends for you. I don't even have anyone to turn back to because I kind of alienated them or marginalized them or kind of cut them out of my life because I just was so focused on the attention you were giving me. And in that regard, and again, maybe the idea that it's a bit abusive, he's saying that like, oh, you lured me in with affection and then you beat me into submission. You made me into what you wanted me to be, even though you enticed me by saying that you would accept me for who I am or what, I thought I was. But the moment you kind of had me emotionally, then you made demands. Then you began imposing your expectations or your guidelines or requirements. And thus maybe some of that was like, look, get rid of your old friends, or, you're with me tonight and you're going to do what I say. And now he's been kind of beaten into submission to the point where like, he expects the full him is no longer welcome. And even beyond that, even if he were to get left behind, as I said, he's got no one to turn back to. So it's like kind of a brutally honest, vulnerable, and pained articulation of where he thinks he stands, or at least where he's worried he stands. And yet again, it feels like, if anyone's ever been in a situation where like you thought things are going a certain way and then suddenly they don't reach out, or you thought they'd message you right after work, and then it's a full day later and they haven't messaged yet, and you start getting a bit paranoid or worrying, like, is this not what I thought? Anyone who's been in that scenario, you could understand how maybe this is the neuroses of the person, and maybe there's a perfectly good explanation. So maybe it's less dire than the narrator is describing, but we're in his head, we're seeing this through his eyes and words, and so in that regard, it's hard to tell just how asymmetrical the relationship is, or maybe how far he's misinterpreting it. Again, I expect there's a bit of both. I expect it is an asymmetrical relationship, and he has been kind of boxed in and cut off from his former social network, but at the same time, this particular instance, maybe because he's been sort of unsettled in that way, he's over-interpreting. Either way, I like the atmosphere, like, had a bit of an exotic feel, not only sort of the hand, like, tribal drums, but even the, like, keyboard work, felt a bit exotic, and yet then he's describing, like, looking out your window, people driving home from work, so suddenly it feels like a very typical or normal urban or maybe suburban setting, and he's just sitting at home kind of staring at his phone, waiting for the call. So, even though the music felt like a bit out there, the story feels very common or, ubiquitous in a modern, urban environment. And, perhaps, you look at buildings and maybe there's many such stories going on that we can't see because we don't know them and they're behind these walls in their rooms. But yeah, so I enjoy a bit of contrast between the feeling of the sonics and the feeling of the lyrics. Once again, his vocals, very eccentric, kind of theatrical, not quite like what I would think of as a musical, which is a bit more sing-songy, but sort of like a very heightened theatrical articulation of a story, to the point where I was really keyed in on the words, even as I was hearing the other details. So yeah, cool vocal work, great songwriting, and I like the composition. Once again, I'm very new to these guys, but even just this first album, which I get it, like, they had existed under a different name, and then they like re-released material under the after they changed their name. But either way, I've gone through like 7, 8 songs now maybe, so I'm obviously still very new to them, but I'm very much liking what I'm hearing. Thank you again to Kim for bringing them to my attention. Do let me know what you think here, and I will see you next time. Peace.